Okay, so good afternoon and welcome to the December 6, 2023 meeting of the Local Agency Formation Commission of Santa Clara County. LAFCO strongly denounces hate speech and does not tolerate disruptive behavior in our meetings. This LAFCO meeting is considered a limited public forum, which means that LAFCO can regulate the time, place, and manner of speech to prevent our meetings from being disrupted. This protects the rights of other speakers and ensures that LAFCO can accomplish its business in a reasonably efficient manner. Speaker comments must be limited to the agenda item being considered by the LAFCO. The presiding officer will make a determination as to whether a speaker's comment is related to an agenda item being considered by the LAFCO. If a speaker does not comply, the presiding officer will rule the speaker out of order. The presiding officer will not rule speech out of order because the presiding officer disagrees with the content of the speaker's speech. This meeting is being held at 70 West Heading Street, first floor, San Jose. As a courtesy and technology permitting, members of the public may also attend by virtual teleconference. However, LAFCO cannot guarantee that the public's access to teleconferencing technology will be uninterrupted, and technical difficulties may occur from time to time. Unless required by the Brown Act, the meeting will continue despite technical difficulties for participants using the teleconferencing option. Members of the public in chambers who wish to address the commission on an item should complete a request to speak form and place it in the designated tray in front of the dais. Individual speakers will be called to speak in turn. Speakers are requested to limit their comments to 3 minutes. Members of the public who are attending the meeting by virtual teleconference and wish to address the commission should use the raise hand feature. Those participating by phone should dial *9. Staff will call you by name or by the last 4 digits of the phone number and unmute each speaker in turn at the appropriate time. Written public comments will be distributed to the commission and posted to the online agenda, but will not be read out loud. Okay, we're ready for agenda item 1, roll call. So, recording secretary, can you please administer the roll call?
Commissioner Arenas? Here. Commissioner Bell? Here. Commissioner Kamei? Commissioner Chapman on behalf of Commissioner Kishimoto? Okay. Commissioner Lee?
Present.
Commissioner Trumbull?
Present.
And Chairperson Melton.
Present.
Okay. We have a quorum.
Okay, we have a quorum. Let's keep going. We're now on agenda item number 2, public comments. This is the time for any member of the public to address the commission on matters not on the agenda, provided that the matter is within the commission's subject matter jurisdiction. All public comments under other agenda items must relate to that agenda item. Speakers in the chambers will be called first, followed by speakers participating virtually. Each speaker will have 3 minutes. For those in chambers, if you wish to address the commission on this item, fill out a request to speak form and place it in the tray. Recording secretary, do we have any requests to speak forms for this item?
No request to speak forms at this time.
Okay, thank you. Recording secretary, do we have anyone attending by Zoom who wishes to speak on this item? Okay, very good. Thank you. All right, let's keep going. Next up is consent calendar. This is agenda item number 3. Right now, we have agenda items 4, 8, 10, and 11 proposed for the consent calendar. Item 4 is approved minutes. Item 8 is 2024 meeting schedule. Item 10 is executive officer report. And item 11 is Clara LAFCO activities. Commissioners, do we have any requests to add or change items to the consent calendar at this time? I see none. This would be the time for any member of the public to address the commission on matters that are included on the consent calendar. Recording secretary, do we have any speaker cards with regards to the consent calendar?
No speaker cards at this time.
Okay, and do we have anybody on Zoom for this agenda item?
Nobody on Zoom at this time.
Okay, thank you. All right, colleagues, looking for a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar.
So moved.
All right.
Second.
Lee and Trumbull, motion and second. Recording secretary, can you please do a roll call vote?
Commissioner Arenas?
Yes.
Commissioner Bell? Commissioner Kamei? Commissioner Chapman for, no?
Just Commissioner Chaplin.
Okay,
Commissioner Chaplin hasn't voted. Call.
Commissioner Chapman.
Aye.
Commissioner Lee?
Aye.
Commissioner Trumbull?
Yes.
Chairperson Melton.
Yes.
Okay, we have 7 votes
Okay, thank you.
as yes.
By my tally, motion carries 7-0. Thank you, recording secretary. And we'll keep moving on. Next up is agenda item number 5. This is study session. LAFCO law, the Cortese-Knox-Herzberg Local Government Reorganization Act of 2000. And before I hand this over to staff for any comments or the presentation, this study session came about because of 2 meetings ago when we were talking about the Gilroy USA amendment application. There were some terms or concepts that we just wanted to spend a few minutes talking about. That was a request of the commission. And so here we are today. And without further ado, we'll hand it over to our executive officer and legal counsel.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just go ahead and step in and start the presentation. Next slide. Back in February of this year, you heard a very detailed presentation from Don Whedon on the history of LAFCO, but I do want to point out some of the high-level points of why LAFCOs exist. Back in World War II, post-World War II, we saw a dramatic increase in our population in the state and economic growth. And because of this increase in population, there was a demand for public services. The demand for public services resulted in the creation of many new public agencies. They were created, unfortunately, without a lot of analysis or thought. And oftentimes, these agencies provided services without coordination, without adequate planning, and it was a hodgepodge mix of overlapping agencies. All of this, plus the premature conversion of ag lands and open space, resulted in the need for LAFCOs. Next slide. So in 1959, Governor Brown Sr. appointed a commission on the metropolitan area problems. This commission studied and made recommendations on the misuse of land resources and the growing complexity of local governmental jurisdictions. It was out of this commission that the legislature created LAFCOs. So in 1963, LAFCOs were created with the adoption of the Knox-Nesbitt Act. And as of 2000, every county in the state has a LAFCO. As you recall, back in June, we celebrated the 60th anniversary of LAFCOs. Next slide. In 1997 through 2000, another commission, the Commission on Local Governance in the 21st Century, was formed. And it made recommendations which were the basis of the Cortese-Knox-Herzberg Local Government Reorganization Act of 2000, quite a mouthful. So you will often hear us call it the Act or CKH. It's found in Government Code Section 5600 at SEC. Out of this legislation, it created greater independence for LAFCOs, it provided clarification and the mission of LAFCOs, and it also had some requirements for LAFCOs, including the requirement to create service reviews for special districts and cities, expanded factors for proposals that LAFCO considers, and the ability to streamline island annexations. In addition, LAFCOs were required to adopt local policies and procedures. Next slide. To that end, Santa Clara LAFCO has over 16 policies that it has adopted. As I mentioned, under Government Code 56300, LAFCOs are required to adopt policies and procedures that encourage and provide for planned, well-ordered, efficient urban development patterns with appropriate consideration of preserving open space and ag lands. You'll hear that preservation of open space and ag lands for me several times during this presentation. So you can see I've listed out all of the policies that we currently have adopted. Next slide. These total 16. Next slide. LAFCOs are primarily made up of 5 members. So there are 2 members, as you know, from the County Board of Supervisors, 2 members that represent cities in the county, 1 member that represents the public that is appointed from the commission, and then there are alternate members for each of those positions. Some LAFCOs have an additional 2 members that represent special districts. In Santa Clara, we have special legislation. It's 56327 in the government code and 56327.3. And our special legislation provides that one of our city members is from the city with the largest population. So we have one of our city members being a representative of the city of San Jose from the council. In addition, we have the ability to expand our commission by 2 special district members. So back in 2013, we actually only had 5 members. I had to ask Nalima because I didn't think it was that long ago, but it's been 10 years now that we had 7 members. So we expanded in 2013 to add 2 special district members. LAFCO is often seen as the watchdog of the legislature, and we are charged as LAFCO with specific purpose: to discourage urban sprawl, preserve open space and prime ag lands, encourage the efficient provision of government service, and encourage the orderly formation and development of local government agencies. The functions of LAFCO that we are required to do include developing and updating spheres of influences for cities and districts, preparing service reviews for all of our local agencies within the county, preparing any other study as the commission sees as needed, and adopting local policies and procedures to exercise the powers consistent with the policies and encourage and provide for planned, well-ordered, efficient urban development patterns with appropriate consideration, magic buzzwords, of preserving open space and ag land. Next slide. LAFCO often serves as a regulatory agency, and that occurs when LAFCO is modifying an existing agency or creating a new agency. It also regulates boundary changes. It regulates, in Santa Clara County specifically, urban service areas, and then also the provision of services outside of a jurisdiction's boundary, which we call the extension of services. This is a great diagram that Nalima and Emmanuel and her team created, and it shows all of the interconnected functions of LAFCO. So you can see at the top is the purpose that we've already gone over. The purpose of LAFCO comes from the CKH Act. The requirement of the Act includes creating LAFCO policies. One of the policies we've called out, you can see it on the left, is countywide urban development policies. That we've called that out from the 16 policies that exist because it is a policy that LAFCO has adopted, the county has adopted, and all of the cities in the county have adopted. From the Act, we get determinations, factors, and evaluation criteria, and we use all of that in order to review typical applications as well as programs that we have. The type of typical applications that we'll be talking about as part of this presentation are sphere amendments or SOI amendments, urban service area amendments, annexations, out-of-agency extensions, and then the programs that we will talk about, the major programs that this LAFCO conducts are service reviews as well as island annexations, and we'll be talking about service reviews in greater detail. So the sphere of influence and urban service area are 2 things that we'll be talking about. But we want to make a distinction between the 2 so that you have a better understanding before I chat about them. For sphere of influence, it is for cities and special districts, while urban service areas are only for cities in Santa Clara County. The sphere of influence is considered the probable boundary and service area of a local agency as determined by the commission, while the urban service area is what is considered it can be either the area that's already annexed into the city, which is already receiving urban services, or areas that a city intends to annex to develop and provide services within 5 years. The urban service area boundary is the critical boundary for a city because once an area is in the urban service area for a city, it is the city who gets to decide if that area will be annexed, not LAFCO. So that in turn becomes a very critical boundary. The urban service area has to be consistent with the sphere. And so we've heard about what the definition of the sphere is. It's the probable boundary of service as determined by the commission. And why it's also important is because LAFCO can't take any actions that are inconsistent with a sphere. So LAFCO must make a determination of the sphere of influence for each city and each special district in the county. And it must update the sphere every 5 years as necessary. And I say as necessary with an emphasis because it's the commission who makes that determination of frequency. Each sphere amendment needs to come with a prepared written statement of certain determinations. And when a sphere is determined by LAFCO, at that time, LAFCO may also choose to recommend reorganization of an agency. The determinations that need to be made, the 5 written determinations are listed here. These are the same determinations for an urban service area. It's the present and planned land uses in the area, including ag and open space, the present and probable need for public facilities and services in the area, the present capacity of public facilities and adequacy of the services the agency provides or is authorized to provide, the existence of any social or economic communities of interest, and the present and probable need for public facilities or services related to sewers, water, and structural fire protection. Next slide. An urban service area in Santa Clara County is the area, as I mentioned, that's delineated as an area that is currently annexed into the city and provided with services, or an area that the city intends to annex and develop and provide with services within 5 years. Next slide. Why it is unique, and this is another part of the act that is specific to Santa Clara County LAFCO and doesn't apply to the other LAFCOs within the state, is if LAFCO approves an urban service area amendment, it is the city who then gets to decide if it wants to annex that land into the city. So the findings that the city has to make once it's in an urban service area is that the area is within the urban service area, the boundaries are definite and certain, there are no split lines of assessment, no islands are going to be created if it's annexed, that the area is consistent with the city's general plan, that the area is contiguous with its existing city limits, and then they have to make sure they've complied with any conditions LAFCO imposed as part of that urban service area amendment. There are a variety of proposals that are considered change of organizations that come into LAFCO. Many of these are infrequent or have not come probably before LAFCO in any significant amount of time. I first started working with Santa Clara LAFCO because of an incorporation, but it hasn't happened in Santa Clara LAFCO in quite some time. But the things that more typically come before LAFCO would be annexations. We've had some dissolutions. You've probably seen some dissolutions of inactive districts. That has been more frequent. So those are some of the ones that come before you more frequently. But for all of these proposals that I've listed, next slide, there are 17 factors that LAFCO has to consider. And the 17 factors I've laid out on the 5 slides. In the next 5 slides, I'm not going to read them all, but I'm just going to highlight them. One is the population and population density, including land area and land use, the need for services and the adequacy and the cost for those services, the effect of the action on adjacent areas, conformity of the proposal with our policies, the effect of the proposal on maintaining the physical and economic integrity of ag lands, the definite and certainty of the boundaries, if there's a regional transportation plan, review of that plan, consistency with the city or county general and specific plans, making sure it's consistent with the sphere of influence, any comments that LAFCO receives from an affected local agency or another public agency, the ability to provide for the ability of the newly formed entity to provide the services to the area, the availability of water, the extent the proposal will affect a city or county in achieving their RHNA. RHNA, as I think all of you know, is the Regional Housing Needs Allocation. And any info or comments that we receive from landowners, voters, or residents in the affected territory. Info related to land use designations that currently exist. The extent the proposal will promote environmental justice. And then any info related to safety issues such as local hazard mitigation plans, the safety element of an applicable general plan, and any land identified as very high fire hazard zones. Next slide. Out-of-agency services are one of the other type of proposals that we from time to time see. And this is when a city or district would like to provide new or extend services outside of its boundaries. And it is required to obtain approval from LAFCO. There are certain exceptions, but the requirement to obtain approval from LAFCO, and LAFCO can only give that approval if the service that will be provided is within the sphere of influence and it's anticipated that there's going to be a later change of organization. So for instance, if it's within a sphere of influence of a special district and it is anticipated that there will be an annexation to that special district. The other option for LAFCO to approve an extension of out-of-agency services, and this is probably more frequent, is to respond to an existing or impending threat to public health or safety of the residents in the affected territory. This will come up because there is maybe a septic tank that is failing or a water well that is failing, and so the second option is more routinely applied. Next slide. There are exceptions to the provision to require approval from LAFCO. One of the exceptions is when the agreement is solely involving two or more public agencies and where the service to be provided is an alternate to or substitute for services already being provided by the existing service provider, and the level of service is consistent with the level of service contemplated by the existing service provider. Other exceptions include the provision of surplus water to ag lands and facilities, and this can include service for conservation purposes or that directly support ag industries. But prior to extending surplus water to a project that will support or induce development, the city or district shall first request and receive approval from LAFCO. Transfer of non-potable or non-treated water is exempt from the requirement of LAFCO approval, as well as services that have been provided since 2001. Local public-owned electric utility services are also exempt, and fire protection contracts have their own provision under 56134A. The last thing we will talk about is one of our major programs, which is service reviews. LAFCO is required to complete service reviews for its cities and special districts. A service review is a comprehensive study, and it is designed to better inform LAFCO, local agencies in the county, and the community about how the services are being provided. It also attempts to capture and analyze governmental structures and how there could be efficiencies of providing those services. The goal is to hopefully identify opportunities for greater coordination and cooperation between providers. The service review has to be done before, in connection with, but no later than the time that the commission completes an SOI. There are 7 written determinations that must be made as part of a service review. Oftentimes, service reviews can be grouped together. It can be grouped together with the type of special district. As you recall, we just did one for the fire districts. So in this case, all 7 written determinations need to be made. These determinations include the growth and population projections for the public agency, local characteristics of disadvantaged unincorporated communities, location and characteristics, the present and planned capacity of the public facilities and the adequacy of those facilities, and any infrastructure or deficiency needs related to sewer, municipal, water, and fire protection. The financial ability of the agency to provide the service, the status and opportunity for shared facilities, accountability for community services needs, and any other matter related to effective or efficient service delivery as required by commission policy. That is it for me. I'm happy to answer any questions. I know this was very dense material.
Great job, Mala. Thank you for pulling together that presentation. I know the CKH is pretty lengthy and intertwined, and so to distill all that down, I really appreciate that. I'm going to scan microphones to see if anybody wants to turn theirs on so as to raise a question from the commissioners or from the alternate commissioners. I'll go ahead and start with a question for either Nilima or Mala. We heard about the 17 Santa Clara LAFCO policies, and I guess question one is, we're soon to embark on a process to modernize Santa Clara LAFCO policies. As a matter of fact, last meeting we created the subcommittee, and that subcommittee is going to have its first meeting next week, so that process is underway. I saw two policies that I'd just like to learn a little bit more about. One was Gilroy Ag or something like that. The screen flashed by pretty quickly. And is that one of the 17, and what is that one about? And then there's also county-wide urban development policies, and is that one of the 17? And also, what is that one about? Just some highlights, please.
Yes, I can provide a very brief overview of the two policies. The countywide urban development policies are the policies that Mala referred to at the beginning of the presentation, where these policies were adopted jointly by LAFCO, by the 15 cities in the county, and this was back in the 70s. And these policies have been in existence for the last 50 years, and Santa Clara County has benefited tremendously from the policies. The fundamental tenets of the policy are that urban development, that cities shall be responsible for urban development, and cities shall plan for urban development and within explicitly designated urban service areas. And they will plan to provide services to the urban development within these urban service areas. And these urban service areas, any amendment of these urban service areas will be only upon LAFCO approval. That's the city's part of it. And the county's commitment is that urban development, the county will not allow urban development in the unincorporated rural areas outside urban service areas. And the county has committed to doing that through its general plan and zoning designations that they have adopted over the years. The third aspect of this is that cities shall eventually annex all of the islands or the unincorporated islands within their urban service areas, and the county and LAFCO and the cities have committed to doing these three things. So that's, and it's because of these policies that this urban and rural, the linkage between urban and rural areas in Santa Clara County is very closely related because one is dependent on the other. We see these as two sides of the same coin where development, it is expected that development within these existing urban areas will happen in a compact where the land within these existing urban areas will be used in a very efficient manner so as to not put pressure on lands that are outside urban service areas, which are basically lands that are not necessarily suitable for urban development, or that they are resource lands such as farmlands or open space lands. So that's the fundamental policy behind that. The Gilroy ag land policies are policies that were adopted jointly by the city of Gilroy and LAFCO and the county in the mid-90s. And these policies were again, strategies to balance growth and development and preservation of farmland. These policies required the city and the county to come to agreement and commit to certain things. Those commitments are no longer, they have not been fulfilled, and so these policies are really not in effect at this point. They're useful for historic purposes. We have them, and this is something that we would talk through or discuss as part of the policy update that we are going to go through. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I also have some questions that I'll save for later about service reviews. Service reviews, of course, are all intertwined in as part of this, but we have agenda item 7 coming up in a couple of minutes, which is an overview of Santa Clara LAFCO service review program. So I'll save for that. Before I go to public comment, let me just do one more scan for questions. Commissioner Bell.
There we go. Hear me? Okay, he told me how to do it. Okay, ABAG and MTC are undergoing a Bay Vision 2050 plus, and they're going to do a Bay Area plan, basically. They're using population projections. Updated population projections from the State Department of Finance, which I think are going to be released pretty soon. What's the relationship between what we're doing and these Bay Area plans, or how do we connect and with the Bay Area plan that ABAG and MTC are doing? Can you give us kind of what's the connection there? The population projections, I assume we want to be very consistent, everybody using the same projections, because if you start using different projections, that throws everything out of whack, I think. So I want to know how we work with them.
MTC and
Thank you. Thanks.
and ABAG's, the Plan Bay Area or the Regional Transportation Plan, that's one of the 17 factors that Mala was referring to that LAFCO must consider when it reviews a proposal. So that's something that we would take into consideration as we review proposals.
The Bay Area has housing also, ABAG housing. Now, the new plan I think for the first time is going to talk about environmental issues, carbon reduction, other kinds of water, et cetera, and make projections and policies on those things. Will they be things that LAFCO will be participating or consistent with in terms of our planning here?
The Plan Bay Area is a very comprehensive plan, and it's for the 9-county Bay Area region, and it includes, I think one of their big goals is the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions for the 9-county Bay Area region. And they take a number of different factors into account in creating that plan, and they have very complex modeling processes that they use. And certainly some of the issues and some of the considerations include availability of water, availability of public utilities, infrastructure for growth as they're doing their modeling, need for housing, affordable housing, and resource conservation, transit and transportation modes, and all of that good stuff. So it's a very involved process that they have. And LAFCO's, we as staff, occasionally staff has provided comments to ABAG and MTC on the preparation of these documents. And like I said, state law requires.
So is there a statutory connection between LAFCO and the Bay Area, ABAG, and MTC in terms of?
There are requirements for some level of coordination, including that that ABAG and MTC must consider spheres of influence adopted by LAFCO
Yeah.
in preparation of their plan, and that LAFCOs must consider the Plan Bay Area in reviewing its proposal. So that's the connection between the two.
Thank you. Thank you.
Vice Chair Arenas.
Thank you. I'd like to see if we can have a breakdown or a handout, a follow-up for the 17 factors.
We will be providing the presentation. We'll upload it to the website. Did you want something more, or which we're happy to provide?
I'm sorry. Maybe I missed it. I didn't see the 17 factors on the presentation? Yeah.
They went by very quickly, Vice Chair.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Can we pull those back up, please, staff? Yeah.
I'm sorry. We listed them on slides 19, 20, 21, 22, and 23. Admittedly, we went very fast so that I didn't have to read each slide, and I think we're going to try to pull them back up. And we
Oh,
will.
I don't mind you going slow and steady on these at all.
So we did list each of the 17 factors, starting on slide 19. And we will put this presentation on the website, so it'll be available to the public and the commissioners. But each
where are
bullet point is one of the factors.
Oh, I see. You know what? Visually, I didn't see them numbered. So I thought, well, I guess where are the factors? Maybe they'll
Each
talk
bullet
about-
point is a
Saw it.
is a
See-
factor, but you're right,
Got
they
it.
are not numbered. So each slide has a couple of factors. Hence, there's 5 slides necessary for the 17
Got it.
factors.
Okay. If you could delineate those, maybe enumerate them for us.
Yeah, I'm happy.
I do like the numbers.
I'm happy to, maybe before we update the slide, I'll change the bullet points for numbers and then put those on we'll put that on the website.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Vice Chair. And before we get to alternate Commissioner Turner, since we're on the factors, Mala, the 17 factors, I have a recollection of a couple of meetings ago, we were talking about the Gilroy USA amendment. And one of the ways, sort of in furtherance of what I heard Commissioner Bell say, of connecting the dots of CKH law and what the state wants commissioners to look at when analyzing an application. I think one of the 17 factors is the housing element and the RENA situation, status, achievement, whatever it is. And I recall I found myself looking at, okay, here's the application from the city of Gilroy, and then I could use CKH to say, all right, taking a look at Gilroy's draft housing element is a legitimate thing to do because RENA numbers are one of the 17 factors. At least that's how I did it. Was that a good use, do you think, of the 17 factors?
Yes, you're correct. One of the factors, and I don't have them numbered, so I can't tell you which number it says extent the proposal will affect a city or county in achieving their RENA. And I do recall during that proposal, you reading that factor out and referencing that.
Okay. It's all connected together.
Correct.
Excellent. Alternate Commissioner Turner, what's on your mind?
Yeah, thank you. No, the presentation was very helpful, and I think it was answered that the PowerPoint, will that entire PowerPoint be loaded onto the website?
Yes, as soon
Perfect,
as I
that'd be
make
helpful.
the
Thank
revisions.
you. Yep, thanks, appreciate it.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. All right, let's do another scan before I head over to public comment. I'm looking for microphone lights turned on. I see none. So we're going to move over to public comment. I have one in-person speaker card. Doug Muirhead. Nice to see you, Mr. Muirhead. Welcome to Santa Clara LAFCO. Recording Secretary, if you can give me 3 minutes, please. And the microphone
you.
is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, commissioners and staff. For the record, my name is Doug Muirhead. I live in Morgan Hill. I have been wondering for some time, looking at the news, looking at executive officer reports, how this agency is going to deal with what appears to me to be conflict between our missions of preventing sprawl and preserving open space and agriculture and the state's desire to do certain things that would impair our ability to deliver on that mission. I am thinking in particular of housing and community development and their housing allocations, which they wanted to put in unincorporated county land, and also the desire of the state water boards to improve local small water service providers who have neither the technology nor the finances to actually provide safe, healthy water to their communities. And so the water board would like those agencies to be replaced by more substantial agencies, which I believe would be probably cities. And so we're dealing with the out-of-service area topic that was brought up. So I don't know, perhaps this new committee that Commissioner or Chairperson Melton mentioned that will start meeting next week is going to make that all clear, and I'll be extremely happy to hear the outcome. But I did want to raise that issue because it seems to me that we're not in a bubble, but we have what we want to do, and it seems to me that there are going to be some conflicts. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, that was the only speaker card I had for in-person speaking. Recording secretary, do we have anybody on Zoom for this agenda item?
No other speakers.
Okay, very good. So let's do a final call for any questions or comments. No action is required on this item. So seeing none, we're going to go ahead and close this agenda item with the heartiest and hail gratitude to our attorney from BBK Law for pulling that together, and looking forward to seeing this posted to the website. Let's keep going. We're going to move on to agenda item number 6. This is Annual Financial Audit Report, June 30th, 2023. There are 2 recommended actions. Number 1, receive a presentation. And number 2, receive and file the Annual Financial Audit Report, June 30, 2023, prepared for Santa Clara LAFCO by Chavin and Associates LLP. And do we have a staff report?
Thank you, Chair. I would like to introduce Sheldon Chauvin from Chauvin and Associates, our independent financial auditor. With that, I think I'll let Sheldon take it away.
Hello and good afternoon.
Hello.
I appreciate the commission allowing me to present remotely and having that option still. I guess it's probably going to continue on that way for a while. And so I am going to give you a brief overview of the June 30, 2023 audit results. And we will touch base on some numbers related to pensions and the impact on that pensions have on the LAFCO and then other post-employment benefits. Really looking at that government-wide view, because you don't get a lot of times throughout the year to actually review those numbers. So please go ahead to the next slide. So the overall audit process, what we do in the audit, it includes obviously documenting internal controls, and that's a significant part of the audit, and it used to be less intensive back in the day before Enron and WorldCom in 2000, I believe that was. But now it's something that we have to do no matter how small or large the entity might be. And so we do spend a significant amount of time documenting controls and understanding them. We do not rely on controls for the LAFCO specifically, but we still have to go through the process of documenting. And in that process, we actually do test a limited amount of control processes. We performed the audit, substantive compliance test following generally accepted auditing standards and generally accepted governmental auditing standards. And after following those standards and working with management now, I think it's been 5 years, we're happy to say that management appears to be cognizant of current events that could impact LAFCO, such as revenue calculations, cash management, deferrals, and expenditures. So your management team has an idea of what they're doing. We are, this is actually one of the easiest audits that we do, to be honest. And your team makes it easier because they're always well prepared. They ask great questions. There's always a little bit of back and forth working with the county because they're so big and LAFCO's so small compared to them, and trying to get information from the county sometimes can be a little bit of a pain. But ultimately, we're able to get all that information and finish up the audit and provide results. Next slide, please. So here's the look at the change in the pensions. Now, keep in mind that LAFCO shares in this with the county. So there's a proportionate share of the proportionate share that LAFCO gets. And so it has an impact on the financial statements, though, as it does with all local governments when you participate. And as everybody knows, CalPERS had a great year back in the June 30, 2022 fiscal year in terms of investment returns. So that was the June 30, 2021 measurement period. So that June 30, 21 measurement period had great returns that impacted fiscal year 22. Well, that flipped over in fiscal year 23 because by the time we issued the 22 report for the fiscal year 22, we already knew that the investment returns in that fiscal year, which would be this year's reporting period, that measurement period would be this year's reporting period, meaning fiscal year June 30, 2023, those investment returns flipped over. And so what happened was you went from a $635,000 net pension liability for the LAFCO to a $1.1 million pension liability for the LAFCO. When you look at these numbers, they're small if you think of larger entities. But for LAFCO, that's a big number, right? And that's a huge jump, twice as much. And it's across the board for local governments that this is happening. Another larger client of mine went from 30 million to 62 million, and they're in the same plan. So some of that had to do with the discount rates changing too. So the discount rates went down, so that's driving those pension liabilities up. Next slide, please. I'll try to stay away from all the different measurement periods on this slide. One thing I will mention, other post-employment benefits have the same accounting methodology behind them as do the pension benefits. The one thing that's significantly different is that the entities, Santa Clara County, LAFCO, they have, and any local government has more control over these plans, these other post-employment benefit plans, and therefore you can set discount rates that are lower than, say, what CalPERS sets. And when you do that, you have a more conservative outcome. You have less impact from bad investment returns and whatnot. So in that case, you see less of an impact in terms of the liability. So at June 30, 2022, the net OPEB, the post-employment benefit liability, was $143,000, whereas June 30, 2023, it was $220,000. So still a significant increase, but not twice as much, right? Next slide, please. So this is the summary of the balance sheet, the statement of net position. And keep in mind, I shouldn't have said balance sheet actually, but it is a balance sheet. In the financial report for LAFCO, you have two sets of financial statements, a balance sheet and an income statement for the funds, and then a balance sheet and an income statement for the government-wide presentation. And it's a little confusing when you have a smaller entity because they look almost the same, right, in terms of the presentation. However, the one key difference is those long-term assets and those long-term liabilities. So the statement of net position includes the non-current liabilities, which includes the net pension liabilities and the net OPEB liability. Also, you get to see what happens when GASB, Governmental Accounting Standards, decides to issue a new standard such as GASB 87, which had to do with leases. You get a nice new line item called right of use assets. Now, if it was a larger entity, like if you looked at Santa Clara or City of San Jose, you'll find that these right of use assets, they're intangible, may be included with the total overall capital assets. And so they won't have a separate line item. Some local governments present them separately, some don't. For LAFCO, it's really the largest intangible asset they have, so it makes sense to present it separately. You will also note that the deferred outflows of resources and deferred inflows of resources change quite significantly. Those are directly related to the pension liabilities. And so the net impact, after you start taking into account these deferred outflows, which were similar to assets, and deferred inflows, which are similar to liabilities, and so you start adding up the change in the outflows, the change in the inflows, and the net pension liabilities, the net impact is actually very small. Next slide, please. So the change in net position, this is the government-wide income statement. And the bottom line here, the really key thing to highlight, and remind me next year not to use that format because the dollar signs got messed up. So I'll make a note on that. But the bottom line here is that the change in net position, it's a negative net position this year. So it's a deficit of $155,000. Whereas in 2022, it was a surplus of $150,000. Now, the key impact or the key driver behind that was, again, the pensions, right? So one year you had a pension credit, and in 2023, you had a pension expense. So that's a direct result of those investment earnings and then the discount rate changes. Also, keep in mind that the deficit net position does not mean that LAFCO's got to close its doors tomorrow. That is very typical, very common for a local government since GASB 34 back in 2004 came into play. And it's one of those things where the reason GASB 34 was implemented was to show that long-term impact that the pensions and the retirement benefit plans are having on local government's future, in essence, so that ending net position. Next slide, please. All right, so the audit results. So you got the 5 no's. That's excellent. No control deficiencies, no exceptions in the audit opinions. Now keep in mind the whole objective under auditing standards for an audit firm is to issue an opinion on the financial statements. And in doing so, our goal is to tell the readers whether or not those financial statements are free of material misstatement. And we're able to do that within a reasonable assurance, which is a high level of confidence. It's not 100%, but a very high level. And so I'm happy to say that we did not have any modifications in our opinion, and we did not have any exceptions. We also did not note any material weaknesses. We did not have any disagreements with management, and we did not have any adjustments that we passed on, meaning that less than material, but maybe significant enough to consider posting, but in the end we did not. So we didn't have anything that was borderline. So that concludes my presentation. Hopefully you gained some information from it, and it was sufficient to keep you involved in the presentation, but not too much that it bores you to death. Any questions?
Thank you, Brandon, for that presentation. I always like to end these presentations with the 5 no's, and that's what I'm seeing there. So thank you for that. We're going to open it up here to see if the LAFCO commissioners have any questions for you. I'm going to scan for microphone lights turned on with the commissioners or alternate commissioners. I'm not seeing any. I'm going to do a quick scan for public comment. I do not see any speaker cards. Recording secretary, do we have anybody on Zoom for this agenda item?
Nobody on Zoom.
Okay,
Mr.
thank
Commissioner.
you. So then looking for a motion, the recommended action is receive and file the annual financial audit report prepared for Santa Clara LAFCO by Chavin and Associates LLP.
So moved.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Lee.
I'll second.
And alternate Commissioner Chapman, thank you very much. We have a motion and a second. Recording secretary, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Two. Commissioner,
Yes.
Commissioner Bell, Commissioner Kamei? Okay. Commissioner Chapman?
Yes.
Commissioner Lee? Commissioner Trumbull?
Yes.
And Chairperson Melton.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I have that motion carrying 6-0.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Let's keep moving on then. We're going to move to agenda item number 7. This is overview of Santa Clara LAFCO Service Review Program. This item is for information only. And do we have a staff report?
I'll keep it very brief. As you know, we just completed our countywide fire service review, and we're moving on to working with agencies to get the recommendations of that report implemented. And so we thought it was just timely to provide an overview on LAFCO's service review program that began in 2004 and has continued multiple rounds, and we're still in the third round. And I think with that, I don't have any further information. We're happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Dania. I really appreciate staff's effort in pulling together the history that's contained in the staff report. And let's see if we have any questions from the commissioners. And Commissioner Chapman.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a quick question. Returning special districts, obviously, I represent. Is there a timeline, or is this really just for an information purpose?
My understanding at this point, it's for information purposes, but a few years ago, we did kind of work with the commission on a general work plan and an order in which we thought we would proceed with, further service review, starting with the countywide fire, then to be followed up by a countywide water and wastewater, then to move to a review of special districts that weren't covered in those prior reviews, and then conclude with cities. So we do provide a general order, but we do not have a specific timeline at this point. I think it will depend on our resources and what we have going on.
And your workload, I assume?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Dunia, I have a question. So we're on our third round of service reviews. As noted, we just got the countywide fire service review across the finish line. That's fantastic. And I believe that next up in the queue is countywide water, wastewater. Do I have that correct?
Correct.
Is that memorialized in the work plan that was approved earlier this year? Is that where that's written down that water, wastewater is next?
I would defer to Nalim on that, but I do know a few years ago we did adopt a general work plan for the third round service reuse, and that's where that order and that kind of composition of how we thought the third round would go was presented and approved by the commission at that time.
Okay. And while Neelim is looking that up, I'll just go ahead and share a thought that I have with my colleagues. A couple of agenda items ago, we were taking a look at, Cortese-Knox-Herzberg Act, and those are the nuts and bolts of California law. And that prescribes that certain transactions can come to us in forms of USA amendments or other types of transactions that come from either the cities or the special districts. And then also we have the service reviews, which is what we're talking about here. And those don't come at us. Those are initiated by us to get done. What do you think about that so far, Dunia?
I think that's correct. I could conceive of, and we haven't had this happen, but I could conceive of a certain type of proposal that might come to LAFCO that maybe would change how we're doing them, but we kind of have a formula, but there may be a type of proposal that's so significant that we feel like we haven't looked at this agency in 10 years, or something radically has changed in that period since we last studied them, and we need to do some kind of service review before we could make a decision on a certain type of boundary change.
Yeah.
But I'm not anticipating that, but I just want to let the commission know that could happen, and you have that ability. You have the ability, of course, to change the order of things, and we actually did that. The third round, we were actually supposed to start with water and wastewater, but with the issues with the fires that occurred in our county, we switched the order and we moved fire up. And so there is the ability to make changes, but, as circumstances change.
Okay. And I'll just keep going for a second. I remember, for example, Dunia, it was maybe 10 years ago, there was a lot of concern in the community about the El Camino Healthcare District in Mountain View. And to my recollection, the LAFCO just said, hey, we're going to just prioritize a service review of the healthcare district. And so using its abilities to set the sequence of service
Using
review.
that as necessary.
As
part.
necessary. There you go, Dunia. I appreciate that. So I'll turn my attention back over to the executive officer, and I'm just curious to see where we have it memorialized in writing, if anywhere that water, wastewater is next.
Yes, we do. And as Dania pointed out, we have, the commission several years ago had adopted a work plan for service reviews, and in that they had delineated the order in which these reviews were going to occur, starting with fire, followed by water and special districts and cities. And so this, the fiscal year 2024 work plan includes the countywide fire service review, which is complete, and then to develop a work plan for the countywide water and wastewater service review. So it is included in the current work plan.
Wonderful. Okay. So the final concept that I'll sign off on here is CKH, very fixed, right? The only way CKH is going to change is by an act of the legislature and the governor signing something that changes the CKH, whereas service reviews are largely prescribed however the local LAFCO wants to do it, in this case, the Santa Clara LAFCO. So if I'm an individual and I'm really interested, for example, in water, wastewater policy, I would probably want to be very highly involved directly, perhaps as part of the technical advisory committee, working directly with the consultant and sort of influencing that process. Does that make sense how I'm saying that, Dunia?
Yes, that's
Yeah.
correct.
Okay.
And that's what we've done for prior service reviews with our technical advisory committee.
Okay. All right, so thank you very much for that. Again, I appreciate the roundup of the history of service reviews that have taken place. Let's see if we have any other questions. Vice Chair Arenas.
Thank you. So for the upcoming countywide water and wastewater service review that you just finished discussing, and it's on the work plan, I'm hoping that we can work with administration, the county administration, to ensure that there's some level of consideration of farm worker housing, access to safe drinking water from our water systems, that we have that in mind. Is that something that's possible?
Okay. Well, we can definitely include that in the scope of the new service review for water and wastewater. We will at some point bring back to the commission a proposed scope, and that can be the time that the commission put forward recommendations or provide direction to staff as to what the scope should be for the service review. Usually that scope is part of putting together a request for proposals for consultants. So we can do that, and we'll keep that in mind as we are working on that.
Thank you. That consideration would be wonderful as we have this service review done. I think our farm workers need to be taken into account, as there's about 700 that come in from a different country and rely on our systems to live here and eat and drink, and we hope that we have potable water better than maybe in their own home country. I don't know that that is true at this moment. So I think we need to make sure that we have those considerations. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Looking at Commissioner Bell.
Okay, on water, in terms of the water district activities that we're undertaking, is we have a water supply master plan for water, the water supply part of things. Okay, the water supply master plan is the overall plan about how we provide water in the county. Okay. The water supply master plan will look at things like how much imported water, how much recycled water, how much groundwater we will use, whether or not it's adequate, whether or not it meets the projections into the future. It's a long-range plan. It's not like a short term. It's more of the master plan kind of that the water district uses. So like looking ahead to 2050, how much water do we need? What is the population projection? And then the other criteria that's a variable is how much conservation are we doing? Cheapest way to provide water is to conserve water, not use it, okay? Is there a strong enough conservation program? Do we project more conservation in the future? Those kinds of issues. And then we look at like the overall water that we get is not from Santa Clara County, it's imported. So half the water right now is imported. About 10% from the Hetch Hetchy system to the northern areas, and 40% from the California project, the San Luis Reservoir, so forth. And whether or not, what kind of mix do we have? How much recycling, how much importing, how much conservation? Those are kind of the discussion topics. Now, we do this every, this master plan, kind of like a general plan. You don't do it every year. You do it every, 4 years or so, and I think the last one was 2019, so now we're updating it 2024. And we're going through that process right now. It'd probably be a good idea to have some kind of maybe an overview on that, or some kind of, even if you wanted a presentation on it, or how we're doing that. Now, the other part of it's water quality, which is what we were talking about just now. And what's the trends on making sure we have good, high-quality water in the county for all people, not just some people, but for all people. And what has to be done. The water district has they have a lot of scientists and chemical scientists and people that study the water quality, and we have the treatment plants that provide treatment. The biggest one is La Rinconada. We just approved a $300 million modernization of that plant, okay? So those are kind of the issues. I think I'm glad that LAFCO's doing this. I think it's a good thing to do. I think everybody has to get in sync, because the Water District's a single-purpose agency, but it's not singular in its purpose compared to other government entities. Every government entity deals with this question of water. So I'm glad LAFCO's doing this. It's going to be very important.
Thank you, Commissioner Bell. I was wondering if staff wanted to jump in with any thoughts or comments.
Yeah, I just want to make, thank you. I just want to make one clarification about what service reviews are. They're really a review of services provided by the various agencies. And when we are talking about water and wastewater, we're looking at agencies that provide wastewater and water services in Santa Clara County. So we're looking at county-wide. So it's somewhat broad in that respect. It's also a look at lack of services being provided. As Commissioner Arena said, there may be lack of services in some parts of the county. So that's, for example, when we did the fire service review, there are portions of the county that are not under the protection of any fire district. They are outside fire districts. So similarly, there may be portions of the county that may not be provided services. So I just want to say, service reviews are not policy-driven. They're just a review of services and some recommendations for how to improve services. And some of those recommendations, many of those recommendations are targeted to the agencies that are providing services. And sometimes some of those recommendations may be targeted to LAFCO as well in terms of oversight of those agencies. Thank you.
Thank you, Neelima. I have some thoughts about service reviews, but I'll just do another scan here for Commissioner microphone lights turned on. Nilima, I don't want to put the cart before the horse by any stretch of the imagination, and the agenda item is not to talk about the forthcoming water service review. I totally get that. But we talked about a scope of work coming back to the LAFCO. Do you have a sense of when that might be? Is it 3 months from now, 6 months from now? And I really don't want to put you on the spot if that requires some additional thought to go in it.
I think for now, we may have to put that on hold until we have a better sense of our policy work, because it seems like the commission has prioritized the policy update, and so I think we are a little bit limited in terms of what else we might be able to take on as a big project until we get that off and running a little bit before we can move forward with the water service review.
Okay, well said. So that sort of preempts the next question that I had, which is probably unanswerable. But one thing that I thought really was a key determinant of success on the fire service review was the concept of the technical advisory committee. And that was a couple of LAFCO commissioners and some city managers and some fire district leadership. Do we have a vision that we would use a technical advisory committee consisting similarly of at least a couple of LAFCO commissioners for the forthcoming water wastewater service review? Again, this is all hypothetical, not part of the agenda item, I get that, but is there any sort of vision out there for what that would look like?
Absolutely. That has been the model that we've used at Santa Clara LAFCO. We've always tried to have a technical advisory committee to guide us through this service review process. And generally, they include LAFCO commissioners and city managers and district staff or board members interested in the issues. So definitely, yes.
Okay. Well, then, colleagues, mark your calendars for upcoming discussions about scopes of work and technical advisory commissions on the forthcoming water wastewater service review. Looks like we've wrapped up the discussion on this. I don't see any speaker cards. Recording secretary, do we have anybody on Zoom for this agenda item?
Mr. Chair, no speakers
Okay.
at this time.
Great. This one is for information only, so that'll wrap up agenda item 7. Dunia, once again, great job. Thank you very much for preparing that staff report. Agenda item 8 was on consent, so we now find ourselves on agenda item number 9, appointment of 2024 LAFCO chairperson and vice chairperson. The recommended action is to appoint commissioners to each of those 2 roles. Not to preempt things, I'll go ahead and raise my hand to serve in 2024 as chairperson. I'm happy to talk about that further. Let's see if we have, it says here to see if we have any speakers on this item before we bring it back to commissioner comments. I see no speaker cards. Sonia, anybody on Zoom for this one?
Chair, no, we
Okay.
have no speakers at this time.
Okay, thank you. The script now says for me to open commission discussion. So I'm going to scan for microphone lights that are turned on. Commissioner Lee.
Actually, I was just going to make a nomination of you, Commissioner Melton to serve as chair, and also Commissioner Arenas to serve as vice chair for the next term.
Second. Oh, sorry. There we go.
I got it. So I heard that as motion by, thank you, Sylvia. I heard that as a motion by Lee, second by Trumbull. Thank you very much. I had some advocacy written down, but suffice it to say, I really appreciate the support of my colleagues. And Sylvia, it's a pleasure working with you as vice chair, and I know 2024 is going to be a great year for LAFCO. So thank you.
Absolutely, and I'd love to hear your speech, though.
Oh, thank you. So I thought I had gotten away from it.
The votes aren't in.
Yeah, the
Commissioner.
briefly.
No, I'm kidding. No, you don't
briefly
have
said, no, so let's go ahead and move on. Thank you, everybody. And Sonia, can you give us a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Arenas?
Yes.
Commissioner Bell? Commissioner Kamei? Commissioner Chapman?
Yes.
Commissioner Lee,
Aye.
Commissioner Trumbull,
Yes.
and Chairperson Melton.
Yes. Okay, I have that motion carrying 6-0, Sonia?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Let's keep moving forward. Agenda item 10 is on consent. 11 is on consent. We're now on agenda item number 12. This is commissioner reports. Do any commissioners have anything to report? Looking for microphone lights turned on, seeing none. We're going to keep moving. Just a friendly reminder, coming up on the agenda, we have the closed session for executive officer performance review, so stay tuned for that. In the meantime, we're on agenda item 13, newspaper articles, newsletters. Staff, any such items?
We don't have any.
Okay, thank you. Agenda item 14, written correspondence. I see in my notes here we have a letter from the Special District Risk Management Authority regarding an award that we've received. I saw that in the agenda packet, so great job, staff. And also an email from Gilroy Council Member Zachary Hilton regarding Gilroy Fire Department staffing. And no action is required on this item. So we'll move on to agenda item 15. This is performance evaluation. We'll soon be in closed session. This is public employee performance evaluation pursuant to Government Code 54957 for LAFCO executive officer. This is a closed session item. Commissioners and LAFCO council will leave this public meeting for the closed session. Alternate commissioners are welcome to join in the closed session. LAFCO staff will continue to be present at this public meeting. So we are adjourned to closed session. Thank you. Okay, everybody, thank you very much. We're returning from out of closed session. This is the LAFCO meeting. We are reconvened. We have a quorum. The agenda item that we just met on was performance evaluation, public employee performance evaluation under Government Code 54957, LAFCO Executive Officer. And Mala, can we please have a report from the closed session?
Thank you, Chair Melton. There's no reportable action.
Okay, thank you very much. We're in the home stretch. Agenda item 17 is to adjourn the regular LAFCO meeting to February 7th, 2024, 1:15 p.m., right here in the Board of Supervisors chambers. To everybody who may be watching, happy holidays. Be safe. Have a wonderful holiday season. Happy New Year, and then we'll catch up with everybody in February. We are adjourned. Thank you. Yay.